Hey guys, Lucky Larry down here at K&L Machine and Welding, and we're out here today. We're in the shop. Oh hell, here comes Willie, my head of security and entertainment, and his sidekick Hank. Actually, we give the entertainment to Willie now, and Hank's the head of security. Actually, he's the man with the plan right there. But at any rate, we're down here. I know it's been a long time since we made a video. Been a lot going on here at the shop. We've been really busy. A lot of little jobs, a lot of walk-in stuff. A lot of stuff that's hard to make a video on. We've been working on everything from fenders and bulkheads for a 1934 Chevrolet pickup truck to, well, let me take you out back here and show you. We've got a 5600 Ford tractor out here that we're working on. We may have to put a clutch in it. We're not sure. Initially, we're going to do some. We're going to flush the hydraulic system and see what we got going on there, and we're going to replace some steering components. The steering on this thing's loose as a goose. Another one of the things we got going on here at the shop. And this is another reason why we haven't made any videos recently. We're kind of in a tight spot here. You know, we don't have a lot of room here in the shop, and one of the big reasons is because of these darn things. Now, what the hell could those be, Lucky Larry? Well, what those are a 9,000 pound automotive lift that we purchased that we haven't got put in yet. As you can see, I've got marked out here on the floor in chalk where I need my floor cut, and we got to cut it, dig it down 19 inches, pour a 6-inch pad of concrete back, then pour a 4-inch wall all the way around it, then pour a 30-inch strip down the middle. Then we can take these guys, set them over here in the pits, the 2 pits that'll be left, run our hydraulic lines over here. We're going to have to cut a little trench here, and then we'll set our controller over to the side, get everything wired in and plumbed up, and we're ready to rock and roll with a flush mount automotive lift. So that'll be a big blessing to us. That'll save me a lot of up and down out of the floor, because let me tell you, these old bones ain't as young as they used to be. But at any rate, today, what we're working on and what's paying the bills, we've got a steering gearbox. I believe this is off. I'm wanting to say this is off of either I think this is either an 801 or 901 Ford. Some kind of a damn Ford tractor. Belongs to my neighbor. My neighbor come walking up here the other day. Said, Larry, I need you to come look at something. So I went down, and what he had was a broken steering shaft. Okay. So he had it to the point of having the actual column itself out, and of course the steering wheel was still attached to the steering shaft. He had he had this shaft out, of course, because it just pulled out, and he was down to the point that, you know, of course the sector and everything was still in there, and he's like, oh hell, I don't know what to do from here. So that's when he come and got me. And I'm glad he did, because I'm sure he, you know, had he went any farther, he may have had some serious problems. So, and he knew that he was going to have to bring it to me to weld anyways. So that's where we're at, and I'm going to show you how we go about welding something like this. And really, the welding isn't the real issue here. The welding's easy. Shit, you know, as far as laying a bead in there, if you can weld, you can weld. You can lay a bead in there. The trick is the setup. You know, you've got to get it straight. You've got to get it lined up. And then beyond that, you have to get it back together correctly. And I'll show you how we do that also. Now, one of the things that I did run into pulling it apart was, of course, I had to get the steering wheel off of the shaft, because the steering wheel was still on the shaft. Now, how in the wide world of sports did we do that? Well, it's held on by this nut and a washer. So take the nut off, and I bump it with a soft hammer a little bit, and it won't come. And and of course I have no idea just exactly how it's keyed on here, whether it's a key, it's splines. It turns out it's splines. At any rate, we go ahead and we tear this thing apart and get the nut off of it, and I bump it with a soft blow hammer for a while, and that don't do any good. So then I put the nut back on the end of the shaft to protect the threads, and pound on it with a regular hammer, and that doesn't do any good. Now at this point, guys, if this is you, if you're doing this repair, do not, under any circumstances, get the lame brain idea to take that nut off and go to beating straight on that shaft. You will screw those threads up, guaranteed. No questions asked. Then, whether you can weld or not, you're still going to be bringing it to me to straighten the threads up. Okay? Because I guarantee you, you probably don't, very few of you have a threading lathe or any dies that would chase these threads. I don't know if I have the dies to chase them, but I guarantee you I can set it up on my lathe and chase them and get them back where they need to be. But that's the point. You don't want to have to do that. And I don't have to do that. Now, why is it that I don't have to do that? Because I brought it over to my press right here, my shop press. Of course, it was, let's see if I can get this thing up here. It was like this, and it had a nut on it. I got these in underneath of it to hold the hub. As you can see, the steel hub is fairly big. We got it up there, had the nut on there to protect the threads, got a push on it. We stroked the press about 4 or 5 times, and she got good and tight, and then she said, boom! And of course, that was when all the rust and everything broke free in these splines. And then it was free. And that's what you need to do, guys. If you don't have a press, if it won't come the way I described, by putting the nut on the end of the shaft and hitting it with a hammer, stop right there. Take it to your local machine shop. Let them press it out for you. Or take it to one of your buddy's house that has a press, or whatever you got to do. Get it to a press and press it out. That's the only end. The only other way you might possibly do this would be with a puller, but it's kind of doubtful. You got to have a bearing clamp and a puller, and there's a lot of stuff going on there, and it's way easier. Just take it down to your local machine shop or your buddy's house that has a press and let him press it out. So, all right, guys, I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to get this set up and lined up, and I'm going to show you how I do that when we come back. Okay, guys, we got our setup made here. Let me show it to you. What we did is we went in, I set this side up in the lathe and turned it back. I took this side to the grinder and ground it back to a V so that we can get some decent penetration on this and should get a really good weld. Now, the setup is I've got this clamped into this piece of angle iron on this end right up to here to where it starts to get larger. And I've also, of course, this end here is laying in here, so that's what keeps it straight. Now, is this a good setup for all applications? No, it's not. We're working within, we got a couple things going on. We're working within the constraints of our customer's budget, because I'm sure he doesn't want to spend a fortune on this old tractor, and I don't want to make him spend a fortune on it. So what we got going on is, what's important with this situation here? Well, the important part is that we have a bearing that runs here and a bearing that runs here. Other than that, the only other thing we have is a bushing up on this end. This bushing is not terribly important. It's not a terribly close fit. So These two bearings are what's really important. As long as everything between there is lined up with this ball screw, we're okay. Okay, with this sector. Now, so what we can do is we can just lay it in a piece of angle and we're okay. We'll tack it here and here. Actually, I won't even clamp this side. There's no need to. And I'm not going to take the time to set it up to do that. Why? Because again, I'm trying to keep my customers' costs down. So we tack it here, we tack it here, then I unclamp it, turn it around, and clamp it back down, and tack it the third place, then we're ready to weld. Now, one thing you will notice, you see this mark here that I made, and this mark over here. Those weren't originally there. Those are what I like to call timing marks. Are they important on this particular job? No, not really, because you know we don't have a real issue going on as far as you know, anything having to be in time. But if it's something that's, but I always do it anyways. But if it is a timing critical piece, okay, and the way I got these alignments, since this was already broke clear off, is I looked at how the shape of the brake, I've you know, got it together just like the piece of a puzzle, and then I marked it, okay? And that way, we will keep it in line. Even though it doesn't matter on this piece, it's just a good practice. So we will line these up and set this down here and weld it. We're not going to clamp it because, like, as I say, there's no need to. It's not that critical up here. If this was a critical piece, what we would have done is we would have drilled this side. Okay, this side here already has a hole in it. Okay, so what we would have done is we would have checked and seen what size hole this is. We would have drilled the same size hole over here. Then we would have made a press fit pin that would have pressed a minimum of at least 1/2 inch up into both sides, and that would have provided our alignment. Okay, now the reason we would have done that is so that we wouldn't have gotten any concentricity issues, which is where you get one side offset from the other like this. Okay, and then you get a shaft sitting here doing this, because if this is, like I say, if this has to be a precise setup, that's the only way to do it, guys. That's the only way to keep it right. The other issue you deal with and keeps it from doing that is for it to be straight. Well, again, we're dealing with that with our angle iron here. Now, our big thing is that we keep it reasonably straight and reasonably concentric. Like I say, if it has to be precise, then you have to drill and insert. And to be quite honest with you, for most of you, it's something you need to take to your local machine shop and let them do for you, because you probably don't have the equipment to do it unless you do have a home machine shop and do have the knowledge and the skills to do this. So, but for the average guy, you can do this, okay? If you have a little MIG welder at home, or especially if you have a nice little heliarc, this is well within the scope of what you can do. Okay, you can grind this stuff back. You can make these marks. You can clamp your part down into a piece of angle iron. You can weld it. Okay, this is well within the scope of what you can do in your shop. If you have you know, just a bare minimum of equipment and materials. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. We'll show you the repair when we finish it up, but I'm not going to show you a whole lot more on this because it's just basic stuff. It's just welding. So this is Lucky Larry down here at K&L Machine and Welding, teaching you how to make your repairs right, how to repair your steering shaft and get it the way it should be. See you in a little bit, guys. Okay, guys, we've got our root pass in this weld. We got our hot pass in, and I'm going to stop and show you where we're at. One of the reasons why I'm stopping to show you where you're at is because we're letting our part cool. One of the things I did before I turned the camera on, I took my air nozzle. I just sat here and blew my air nozzle on it while I rolled it. And that's fine. Do not, however, because we don't want to overheat this shaft, okay? Because this back here, this is a hardened bearing race. This is a hardened bearing race. We don't want to get, we don't want to get these bearing races too hot, because if we do, we take the hardness out of them, and we can't have that. Anyways, so I took air hose and cooled it off, and that's what we're doing. We're letting everything cool down, and it's down to the point that I can lay my hand on it. So we're in good shape. The big thing I want to stress here is do not dunk or pour water on this shaft to keep it cool because you're afraid of getting it too hot. Cooling it off too fast is worse even than getting it too hot. If you cool it off too fast, what happens is you crystallize the weld metal and it will break again on you. This stuff has to cool slowly. Okay. Now, I'm sure some of you are saying, well, Lucky Larry, just how straight can that shaft be, considering how you're doing this? Well, let me just show you how straight it is. Okay, this is a flat table, and the best way to test this is just to roll it. Okay, you roll it, and you watch the end that's not on the table, and see if it does this. If it's straight, it won't do that. If it's crooked, it'll do this. Okay. So let's take a look. Let's see where we're at. I don't know about you guys, but it looks pretty good to me. We're in good shape. We're in really good shape on this. It's straight. It's a good weld. As I say, I am heliarching this because to me that is the best way to do this. It's the way to keep the least amount of heat input into it. But if I didn't have my heliarch, I would not be afraid to use my MIG welder on this. I would, however, be a little reserved on using a stick welder. If it's all I had and I had to make the repair and I didn't have, I didn't have the time to wait to get it to a machine shop, yeah, I might try it. But that's really not in your best interest because stick welders just, that's for structural welding. That's for big heavy gorilla welding. This is something you kind of need to finesse, guys. So there's where we're at. Be back when we're all done and everything. We got our cap on this weld, and we'll show it to you. See you later. All right, guys. I just remembered something that I forgot to tell you, and I would be severely amiss if I didn't say something about this. If you should decide to do one of these repairs like this on your own, weld your own steering shaft should it break, or any other kind of shaft, one of the things you got to be concerned with is stray arcs. Okay. Now, the biggest concern on this one is, this is a precision ball screw here, and the one thing we can't have is an arc through that ball screw, okay? Because that thing is just like a bearing. That's how it functions, as a bearing. And you cannot have any stray arcs through it. So, when you're welding something like this, make sure anywhere you don't want any stray arcs, like a bearing race like this, or a bearing race out here, or, of course, through this ball screw, make sure that your ground, you either ground here to the actual part in a place where it don't matter if it gets a stray arc, or if you're grounding to your table and you're depending on your table to ground it, make sure that the only thing touching that table is areas that it doesn't matter if you get an arc. Because as you're rolling this thing around, you can almost guarantee you're going to get an arc from the table to the shaft. Now, were we up here and we were depending on the to ground through this ball screw, well, what would happen? We would get an arc between one of those balls and the shaft, or one of those balls and this ball nut. okay? And that is absolute disaster for that. Would it continue to work after that? Well, probably. But what would happen? It would have a rough spot in it. And rough spots like that lead to wear because we have broken down the case hardened layer in that area. So be extra careful with that. Always, no matter what you're welding on, be careful of where you're grounding. Ground as close to your work as you can, as close as what's feasible. Don't take the chance of you know, if you're welding on a car, we'll say, don't take a chance of arcing through a wheel bearing or arcing through a transmission bearing, or worse yet, an engine bearing. Just watch what you're doing, guys. You know, be careful with where you're grounding. Ground as close as feasible to where you're actually working. Don't let it go through any kind of bearings or anything like that. Okay, folks, we got our weld repair finished, and as you can see, it actually looks pretty good. Got a very nice weld going on here. Not too much buildup. The only real litmus test left is, will the bearing go over it? And yes, it will. So the only thing left for us to do is to pack all this with grease, put it back together, and get it back on the tractor. And so we can pretty well call this job complete as far as this video goes. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If you would, please go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and give us a comment. You like it, you don't like it, you hate it, whatever. Give us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. I'm sorry it's been so long since our last video. As I say, we've been kind of busy in here, but you know, I try not to get too busy to make these videos occasionally. I said early on I was going to try to do it once a week, and I'm really going to try to hold to that, although it's tough when you get as much going on as we've had the last several weeks. So with that, I'm going to say this is Lucky Larry down here at K&L Machine and Welding. We'll talk to you later.